This is an open letter to my Cuban American friends. Uh, I had some very interesting discussion with you guys on the, as they say, on the internets, and it was very interesting in terms that, in a way that, um, you have been misinformed a little regarding at least this matter that I'm going to bring up. Um, Here's the thing, folks. When I brought the subject that Cuba is exporting medical doctors to around the world, and that's an evidence that they have a system that's somewhat working, and my idea was that if the embargoes are lifted by Uncle Sam, whom I love, uh, if the embargoes are lifted, Cubans can have their functioning system that has produced so many doctors, and they can enjoy, if they can enjoy free trade with United States as a socialist, semi-capitalist, socialist system, they would have a better time than they have right now. Now, that aside, that's a bigger discussion. But I noticed that many of you jumped on what I said and told me that no, that is not a good example to state because uh, the Cuban doctors are being abused and they're not being paid well, and therefore that's just a non-starter. That's not a positive point on the side of Cuba, but it's a negative point because these doctors are being enslaved, as as some of you put it, and and all of whatever else you guys said. So it needed a longer discussion. So here's a longer discussion regarding this matter. First of all, Cuba is not the only country that trains doctors for free and expects many years of service from them in return. A lot of countries, especially all over Asia, I'm not well informed about South America or Africa, but I know for a fact that all over Asia, countries as democratic as we like to call them, as India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Middle Eastern countries, a lot of countries do what exactly Cuba is doing. And that is to say, the government picks up the bill for educating young but poor, talented but poor volunteers. The government pays for their education in the fields that are needed, such as medicine, engineering, whatever, mostly medicine. But whatever the government does research, and whatever the government finds out that there is a need for in the society that they are trying to run, and they freely educate them. And based on this education and how long this education is and how expensive this education is, they expect the volunteer to provide the system that has paid for his education many years of very cheap service. And that's a give and take. We educate you for free, and then you provide us with many years of service for free. And as far as the youngster is concerned, that's a very good deal, because the options that the youngster has is that whether he can become a laborer for the rest of his life because he can't afford the education, or he can go into this program and have the government pay for his education, and then for the rest of his life he can be a doctor, although for many years he has to provide his services at a discounted rate for the system that paid for his education, i.e. the government. And this is an accepted practice in many parts of the world, most parts of the world, who actually have a program, have a stable program that they can manage, have a stable country that they can manage. This is a good program, a very popular program, and the reason is simple. When the government gets to when these graduates get out of these programs, if they're finished, and the government basically has this option of sending them wherever the government wishes, because the government is going to pay these recent graduates a very small, a token income, and expects them to live on that small income. So the government can send them to everywhere, especially the vulnerable places, the neglected places, the out of the beaten path places. So the citizens of those countries that also live in rural areas and out of beaten path areas and neglected areas, they also can have some kind of access to some kind of health care, because there is a doctor in town which the government paid for his education, and now that doctor is providing the government with many years of service in return for his free education. Therefore, the government has a free hand to send young doctors to very remote places within the area that the government manages, so they can provide health care to those citizens as well. Now, this is how Cuba is doing it. In Cuba's situation, they have produced so many doctors that not only they're servicing their rural areas and their own neglected places and their own very out of the beaten path areas within the Cuban island, they're also they have access, so they're sending these guys overseas. Yes, the overseas countries, they probably have to pay more for these doctors to the Cuban government, and they do that because these services internationally these services have a fee, and I'm sure that Cuban government is not charging them full price. They're not charging those destination countries like $100,000 a year per doctor. No, the Cuban government probably, as you guys stated it, the Cuban government is charging those destination countries also a modest fee of $3,000 a year or $4,000 a month or $5,000, not $100,000 a month. And of that $4,000 a month, the Cuban government gives a portion of it, a small portion of it, to the doctor himself, again because the government has paid for the doctor's education. Therefore, the doctor is under a certain contract that they have signed, that instead of the free education, they own the government and many years of very cheap service. And again, Cuba is not the only country that does this. India, what you guys consider as a democracy and supposedly something good, India does it. India educates many doctors for free and then sends them within the rural places, within the neglected places within the Indian country, and then exports many of them overseas to other nations. And the same situation, that Indian government collects the most of the income that the destination countries have to pay and gives a portion of it to the doctor and keeps most of it. Now, this is how these countries are conducting business, and they're getting a good deal because a lot of their citizens in very remote places also get access to healthcare. Now, in contrast to that, and it's not slave labor because it's a trade. It's a trade. Free education for many years of free service, more or less. It's a trade-off. Now, contrast this with what United States does. Uncle Sam. I love him. But there are many things that Uncle Sam is doing right, and there are many things that Uncle Sam is doing wrong. Things that cannot be totally left alone to the free markets is things such as education, such as housing, such as these things cannot be fully left to healthcare, education, and housing. These things cannot fully be left to free markets. Capitalism doesn't work, and you see exactly in these three fields is that where Uncle Sam is not, Uncle Sam's citizens are not, having a good time, having a difficult time. Many of Uncle Sam's citizens having a difficult time in these three fields: healthcare, education, and shelter, with the number of homeless and with the expensive education and with the healthcare that is frankly non-existent in many neglected areas, many remote areas. And you can see all kinds of articles about this matter in all kinds of publications. I give you just one example. There was a PBS program in which they showed that there is this group of doctors. I think Médecins Sans Frontières. It's a group of volunteer doctors in their older age that they joined this organization that provide medical health service to neglected areas on the planet. It's I guess French organization. I'm not sure if it was Médecins Sans Frontières or it was another equivalent organization of it, American or whatever. But the point was that this group, this organization's job was to provide healthcare to neglected areas of planet Earth. Now, can you believe that this PBS program was about the fact that these guys were providing these services as well as to shitholes like Ethiopia and Eritrea and Zambia? They were also had on their schedule to provide the same services in West Virginia. And you're thinking to yourself, West Virginia, it's like it's got a couple of hundred miles from the capital of the empire that is, the United States, and it's a neglected area, and charity organization has to provide medical services to it. This is where you see that, it seems the system is not working because, if it was working in such a rich country as at the heart of the empire, you wouldn't have to depend on charity organization. I mean, you would think that if the relationship with Cuba was good, you would think Cuba would be sending Cuba would be dispatching permanent the same doctors that Cuba is dispatching to Africa. Cuba would have been dispatching them to West Virginia because the need is there. The need is there. Why the need is there? This is the reason the need is there. Because the United States, Uncle Sam does not have the same program as India does regarding training doctors, or Cuba does. United States goes about it in a different way. United States says, okay, you think you have the aptitude for medicine, you youngster, No problem. You can get a loan. You can come and borrow money from me through Sally Mae, or borrow money from whoever that is, but it's guaranteed by me through Sally Mae, and you can go study medicine, do whatever the fuck you want. And once you graduate, but once you graduate, we want this money back. We don't care what you do after you graduate, but we want this money back. So the graduate, what happens to the graduate is after he or she graduates with all this loan, big loan, after 7 years of studying medicine, for example, the graduate has to go out and try to charge as much as he can his customers, his or her customers, who are his or her customers. They're ill people who can at least afford to pay lots of money because they're already ill, they're sick. The sick people and ill people who already can ill afford to pay lots of money, cannot afford to pay lots of money. This doctor is forced to go charge them as much as he can in order to pay off his loan to Sally Mae. And guess what? You don't find, you cannot charge people in neglected areas or remote areas lots of money for your services because they don't have it. So what happens? The graduates from medical schools of Uncle Sam, none of them go to neglected places after they graduate, as is the case in India or Cuba or Pakistan or Sri Lanka. They can't do that because nobody's forcing them. The government is not forcing them. So they go to the biggest cities they can find in the West, in Uncle Sam's land. They go to the biggest cities and the richest areas of those cities that they can find and put up an office there as best they can and just try to gouge their customers as best they can because they got a big fucking loan to pay off for many years. And when you ask them, again, if you ask around, you will find out that many residents who, medical residents who have graduated in Uncle Sam's land from the medical school, for many, many years after they graduate, they're actually living as poorly as those Cuban doctors are, because although they're charging hand over fist for their services in the rich areas of town, in rich cities, in rich states, but most of the money they make from these rich customers, they have to pay in a way of paying off their loans to Sally Mae or whoever. So in the way that Uncle Sam is handling this situation is that not only the neglected areas of the land are being, continue to be neglected in just, at least in this one instance, healthcare. Not only they're being continuously being neglected because these doctors, young graduates, will never go to a neglected place because they already know they cannot charge a lot for their services in those neglected places because the locals don't have the money in West Virginia. So no doctor goes there, and these young and the older ones don't go there because they already have established business in good large cities, rich large cities. And the younger ones will not go over there because they got a big loan to pay off. And if they go over there, with the kind of money they make over there, they can never pay off their loan. So it's an incentive, it becomes an incentive for all these educated professionals to continue neglecting the neglected areas and the neglected peoples and concentrate in providing their services to a small group of very wealthy individuals because they fucking have loans to pay off. So when you say that, I mean, the doctors in Cuba are enslaved, it just tells me that you haven't been studying about this matter a lot. You haven't been, you're not informed about the matter too much. Uh, so, don't know what to say. This is the situation. Many countries do it, and the result is good. It's shameful that West Virginia and West Virginia is not unique in this fact. There are many, many, many neglected areas in United States proper. Within the borders of United States proper, there are many neglected areas in terms of healthcare, in terms of shelter, housing, and in terms of education. And all the goodies are concentrated in very small pockets of affluent people. And whether it be it healthcare, whether it be it education, whether it be it shelter, so there is this, and all this idea of these the MAGA people and the protests in this regard, protests that we see that has taken place during the past decade, you can say, left and right, whether it has, racial roots or racial connotations or national connotations or, whatever it is, in reality, it all goes back to economics. I might be wrong in that. I'm often wrong, but at this point, I have reached this conclusion that most of it is economics. And what I mean is that all these neglected areas, these neglected pockets of population, that is not getting health care because doctors are expensive and the doctors are all concentrated in the rich pockets of the nation. There are all these neglected areas that neglected in terms of healthcare, neglected in terms of housing, neglected in terms of education, and then so that brings about a lot of resentment. It may have a racial tone to it. It may have a national tone to it. It may have a patriotic tone to it. But it all goes back to economics. That there is a lot of disparities between the haves and the have-nots, and as a result, you have a lot of exhibition of a lot of frustrations out in the society. I'm not saying that communism is good. What I am saying is because communism in reality doesn't work. It doesn't work because common people need to be incentivized to work. You don't need to incentivize college professors to work because they're college professors, but you need to incentivize the common man to work, and that's why capitalism has worked so well, because it incentivizes the common people to work hard. But many areas that the society is essential to the well-running of a society, such as education, healthcare, and housing. Capitalism, there is no incentive for capitalism to work. There is no incentive for capital investment because the returns are not so good. I mean, primary education, which is the most important education, the first 12 years of education is the most important part of education, gets the least funding, but higher education gets a big chunk of funding, and defense gets the biggest chunk of funding. Uh, Again, it, it's all about incentives. It's all about what the society needs, the needs of the society, and are you able to, can capitalism uh, cover all the bases, satisfy all the needs of the society? Can we satisfy all the needs of the society through capitalism? And the answer is no, because not everything is profitable. And as soon as the profit motive goes out the door, then you have to depend on charity, and charity is very unpredictable. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Therefore, housing is up in the air. You have $1 million houses, but then you have a bunch of homeless. Education is up in the air because you have a bunch of uneducated people, but they can't afford to educate themselves, or they don't want to go under back-breaking loans to educate themselves. So and then you have healthcare. There's no profit in providing healthcare to neglected areas, or out of the beaten path areas, and there's no profit in that, so nobody does it. So that's where government, in those other places in the world, the governments have decided that, okay, in these areas that capitalism does not function well, we need to come up with a new plan. As simple as that. So I think Cuba is being treated unfairly. I think if Cuba was, I still think there is a racial motive in it as well, because Norway and Sweden are just as socialist as Cuba, but they're being, Uncle Sam treats Sweden and Norway in a much more lenient way than Uncle Sam treats Cuba. And I think that's mainly because I feel there is a racial aspect to that, because the Norwegians and the Swedish are pink skinned and the Cubans are browns and blacks. I think they should be treated more fairly, and I mean, to be frank, if you actually think you have a better idea by having more contact with people who you think have a worse idea, there's a better chance you can, convince them to follow you than to not talk to them. Here's the thing, my Cuban friends, what they neglect to tell you is, they tell you that no, we should, not talk to them, not trade with them, not do this, not do that, not do the other, until they give up and until they choose to follow us. Yeah, you can do that, you have done that, but I mean, you look at the results, and Uncle Sam has been, not speaking with the Cubans for 60, 70 years now. What's the result? More suffering. Well, in actual fact, if you'll come out as friends and you start trading with them just regularly, tourism, trade, everything, just same what Obama had started, and bring the tension level down, and treat Cuba as you would Sweden, I think you would have a much better effect in that society, in that leadership. I think you would have the kind of effect that you want by talking, by trading. I mean, you cannot change people's mind by not talking to them. But you have a good chance of affecting people in the long run and changing their mind, but by actually talking to them and by having more contact with them. This contact is essential. I'm not sure what they tell you that we should not talk to them until they correct their behavior. That's not how the world works. That's you can send a kid to his room and not talk to him as a punishment for a period of time, but the correct thing is that sit the kid down and talk to the kid and try, and by talking and conversing and just living and showing respect and showing friendship and showing compassion, you're in a much better position to convince the kid that you're on his side and you want what's good for him. And if your way is better, the kid will eventually follow your way, follow your path. But by sending the kid to his room for 70 years as a punishment, the kid is an old man now. I don't think you can convince the kid that he's wrong. I mean, it's been 70 years and the kid has been in his room and he hasn't been convinced that he's wrong. So I think the best, and not only with Cuba, this idea of embargoes and sanctions with whoever we don't like, it's a silly idea. It's wrong. You cannot fix the others if you think you're right. Only by more contact you can actually show them that you're right. Not by less contact. It's like, imagine that there is a scientific objective, and there are two scientists going about achieving this objective. If one of them is wrong and the other side is wrong and you think you're right, isn't it better to converse with the other scientists and show them your results and they show you their results, and then by talking and communicating you can convince the other scientists that yes, reaching this objective through my way is much better. You see my results, it has given much better results. And just this communication and cooperation and and Cuba will come out of whatever you're saying, totalitarianism and communism. Cuba will slowly come out of it, because eventually, the right way towards the objective is recognized. But that can only be recognized by more contact, not less contact. In fact, there is more misunderstanding with less contact. I understand that, for example, it was in the news that President Biden was suggesting that maybe there should be a direct line between Washington and Beijing. The same thing they had during the Cold War with the Soviets. I'm sure that line still exists. They had two lines. They had one line, now they have two lines. One with Moscow and one with Beijing. And why is that? Because They recognize that more communication, more instant communication, direct line is better at achieving the objective, which is, peace, hopefully, than, not communicating. Because when you don't communicate, there is chances of for all kinds of misunderstanding. Same thing works with Cuba. If you communicate with them, if you trade with them, there is less misunderstanding, more understanding, and eventually, if you're right, which Uncle Sam is right in many ways, and Uncle Sam is wrong in some ways. So you pick up something from them, and you learn something from them, and you teach them something, and they learn something from you, and they teach you something, and the whole thing moves forward without, people suffering. But communication and trade and interaction is the first step. Whether it be Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all of these shitholes, if Uncle Sam wants to, if Uncle Sam's way is right, by communicating more with them, trading more with them, eventually the other side will also recognize that in which of these situations Uncle Sam is right, and they probably will follow. And there are some things that Uncle Sam needs to learn from them, including what kind of program should Uncle Sam consider, so Uncle Sam doesn't have to leave the healthcare of some of its most vulnerable citizens to charity. I mean, unpredictable charity. It's eventually Uncle Sam has to also adapt a system like Cuba in terms of trying to provide healthcare for its citizens, because a large number of Uncle Sam citizens don't have access to healthcare. Eventually, and don't have access to doctors, don't have access to healthcare. In West Virginia, eventually Uncle Sam also has to adopt some kind of program similar to India, similar to Pakistan, similar to Cuba, in order to be able to provide health services to its remote locations, remote populations. West Virginia is not that remote and still being neglected, right? West Virginia is a couple of 100 miles from Washington, D.C. And still, they have to depend on, some charity medical organizations who goes there probably once every 4 or 5 years, because these guys have schedules. They go a couple of months to Zambia, and a couple of months to Zimbabwe, and a couple of months to West Virginia. And when you look at that schedule, you find out that once every 5 years they get to spend some time providing some kind of health services to the citizens of West Virginia. And don't you find that objectionable? And as opposed to Cuba, which has not only provided enough healthcare workers for its own population, but now it has excess that it can actually send them around the world to help other populations. Yes, the doctors are not getting paid, but as we went over it, the doctors have been given free education. Now they have to provide some years of free service wherever the government decides that their services is needed. Same thing with the American resident doctors, who are living in a very poor conditions and working like hell to pay off their student loans. But they can't go to neglected area, work in they can't go and work in neglected areas because working in neglected areas doesn't pay the bills, nor will it help them to pay off their student loans. Love you, Uncle Sam.